Okay, so we're looking at the website called This Is Sand, and I'm going to hit play now. And I'm going to think about what color scheme I can use for creating my sand art. Here I've got just a solid color, but then I get the whole spectrum to use. So I think I'm going to go with something that's monochromatic, which means meaning one. I'm going to pick one hue or one color and stay within that hue while changing the values. So maybe I'll go with greens and click and drag and just start filling up with sand. The longer I drag, the more my sand fills up. And again, I'm going to do a monochromatic color scheme, so I'm going to do a lot of different values of green. Okay, so I filled my entire space using green in a monochromatic color scheme. I'm ready to save it. So I'm going to the check mark. I'm just going to type my name, and I'm going to also include my color scheme. And maybe I'll just do something that describes it a little bit. And then I'm going to download it. So it's going to give me the option to save it in my downloads folder. You can go right to your downloads and put it there. Let's see. And then I'm just going to title it again, same thing. And I noticed that it's in the JPEG file format, and that's going to work great for bringing it into Photoshop. So I'm going to save it, and it downloads. And now I'm going to open up Photoshop. So I'm going to my Start menu. Actually, before I do that, I think it probably makes sense to actually move this into my photography shortcut folder. So if I go back to the File Explorer and I go to my downloads, I can see my monochromatic JPEG file here, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to cut it out of the downloads folder, and then I'm going to go to desktop, where I'm going to find photography shortcut, and let's just say I happen to be in period 4. I already have my Miss Iovani folder. I'm going to double click to open it up, and I'll right click and paste it right in there and close that out. So now I can go to the Windows Start menu, and I'm looking for Adobe Photoshop. It's probably going to be under the A sections for programs. You want to open up Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop CC 2017, not Photoshop Express. You want the full program. And so when Photoshop launches, I'll be able to open up my work, and I'll be able to manipulate the colors even farther. So let's see. I'm going to go to File, Open, find the photography shortcut folder. It's usually on your desktop. And then I'm going to find my folder, and here's my monochromatic file. Okay. So down here, you've got something called adjustment layers, and you have a whole variety of options here. You can really use any of these to manipulate your work. If you want to invert it, that's going to change it from negative to positive. So the opposite of green, using the CMYK color spectrum, is going to be magenta. Let's say I don't want to invert it. I can actually hit Control Z on my keyboard, and it will get rid of that adjustment. And maybe I'll choose hue saturation. So the adjustments are going to be a layer that sits right on top of your original file. And every adjustment comes with a white mask. So first I'm going to do some hue and saturation adjustments here. Hue is another word for color. So that's going to wildly change my color scheme here as I drag the hue slider back and forth. Saturation, as an example, neon colors are highly saturated. So the more you jack up your saturation, the more intense or more like neon colors they might appear. And you can play around with lightness or darkness if you want. I tend not to touch that too much. But you could also choose some of these presets too. So let's just see what red boost looks like. Changes it a little bit, but not much. Strong saturation. I'll just go with default. And maybe I'll do a little bit more towards yellow green here. And then I'll close it with these double arrows. So now the nice thing about having the mask in here is you can reveal any part of the original background that you wish. So the mask is going to work in conjunction with your brush tool, which is right here. And the brush is always going to work with black and white default colors. So make sure that you have black and white, or click the little boxes so they go back to black and white. I'm just going to swap them so black is in front with these arrows. And then I'm going to grab my brush tool, and actually I think I'm going to grab my gradient tool. You could do your brush tool and you can brush anywhere here and you're going to see some of your original background underneath. I'm going to choose the gradient because that's another tool that works with any mask that you have in the layers palette. But the reason why I actually like the gradient is because you have all these shapes up at the top that you can choose for your gradient. So you can drag your gradient like a straight linear gradient, depending on which way you click and drag. Your gradient could be the shape of a circle. You could try the angle with a soft and a hard edge together. This is a reflected gradient, and then there's also a diamond. And I think maybe I'll just stick with this one here, which is the linear. And as I click and drag across, I can see my original underneath. So the black is revealing what's underneath, and the white is concealing the original, showing me that yellow hue cast that I added earlier. If I want it to be really more dramatic, so that you guys can easily see it, I can always click back on the adjustment and really change it even more. So that makes it a little bit more obvious where the masking is happening. And then I'm going to save it. So when I go to File, I'm going to go to Save As, and I'm already in my Miss Iovani folder. And this time it's going to be a Photoshop file because Photoshop files have layers in them when you add them. So it went from a JPEG file to a Photoshop file, and then with a Photoshop file, those layers are visible. So I'm just going to leave it the same title because I don't need to change it. I'll be able to tell which is the edited version because it'll be a PSD file. And then I'll click OK for maximize compatibility. Photoshop will always ask you that. You can always click OK on that. And now I have two files. If I go in the File Explorer and I go into the photography shortcut in period 4, I've got my original version and my Photoshop version here. So that's some basic editing in a nutshell with adjustment layers. Have fun with that.